Is mountain biking expensive? Well, it can definitely seem it if you see the latest and greatest bikes, or even if you nip into a local bike shop. Some of those fanciest bikes are thousands and thousands of pounds and dollars. And you've probably all had that family member as well who questions why you're so obsessed with your bike, then asks you how much it is, and their reply is always, you could buy a car for that. And yes, you probably could. So, is mountain bike expensive? And let's have a dig into it. Why is it? I think for a proper mountain bike, you've got to be spending about £1,000 or about $1,000 to buy one at the lower end where you're getting a hardtail, but it's a proper mountain bike. It's not one of these things that looks like a mountain bike, but breaks at the first off-road ride. But of course, that is brand new. Secondhand, you can buy them much cheaper, which I found out in the past, where I bought that hardtail for £300. It was really good value and great quality as well. But arguably, nowadays, mountain biking doesn't have to be expensive. You could buy a Nuke-proof Mega Comp for £2,999, which is the same bike that Sam Hill has won an EWS on. Yes, albeit not as fancy, not with the nicest components on there, but really it's the same design, it's the same bike. Also nowadays, we have these direct-to-consumer brands like Canyon, YT, just to mention two, where they are just bringing the value of bikes up and the price of them down, because that business model means you're cutting out at least two middle businessmen, so just less margins, cheaper bikes. Also in the UK, we have sort of larger stores, outdoor stores, or even automotive superstores that are selling their own brand bikes. We've got Kleber and Carrera. And for about £1,000 there, you're getting a proper full suspension bike. Of course, hardtails are cheaper. I know around the world there are different other options of places like this, kind of selling different bikes, not mainstream mountain bikes, but they're really offering great value and great bikes as well. Think at the budget end of mountain biking now, the bikes are so capable, really much better than say 10 or 15 years ago when you had to spend proper money to get a bike that would work. Now I think you get a really good budget bike. I've also had a bit of a look online to see what sort of deals there are around, and I've had a quick look on eBay and I found a 2018 Santa Cruz Nomad version 4 for £3,000, so just a couple of years old, and that's a 40% saving on the new bike that would have been £5,000. So if you want to spend a bit of time, I definitely think you can find some bargains out there. At the higher end of the market, there are some sort of eye-wateringly expensive bikes, and we're definitely seeing more bikes come in that sort of £10,000 or $10,000 bracket, which is kind of pretty much expensive as you can get for a mountain bike. It used to be reserved for road bikes, that sort of prices, but you've got really sort of high technology. You've got materials like titanium, carbon fibre. I think one of the easiest things to pick out of that is something like the SRAM Access wireless shifting, whereas the sort of highest end of technology, you've got wireless electronic shifting. And it's never going to be cheap. Although saying that, it might trickle down eventually, but the higher end, it's always going to start off very expensive. And just looking, that SRAM Access rear mech is €750 for a rear mech that, yes, you could break off. And the same sort of thing does the same job as the SRAM Eagle NX rear derailleur, which costs €119, so much cheaper. But it is at the cutting edge. It's brand new technology, and you kind of can't expect it to be cheap, but hopefully it will trickle down. But I think bikes, like many other things, cars, motorbikes, there's just different ends of the scale. You know, down here you could buy a second-hand Peugeot car for £300 and it'd do the job. Of course, you can spend hundreds of thousands or millions on Aston Martins and very nice cars. Now over to someone within the industry that has a really good grasp on why things might cost more than others, and is mountain biking expensive? So I've come to speak to someone, an industry insider, who should know something about it. Nick Larsen is a cycling industry lifer who's had many roles within the mountain bike industry, but maybe the first one that a lot of people will know him for is Charge bikes and their affordable hardtails. But now Nick is in charge of bike design for Cannondale. Nick Larsen, you're a cycling industry lifer. You've been around the industry for a long time. A lot of people will know you from Charge bikes and affordable hardtails. Was that your mission at the time with Charge bikes?
Yeah, we wanted to make all bikes more affordable and easier for sort of people to get hold of and get into the sport. So it was mountain bikes and urban bikes as well at the time.
Is there a reason why they weren't, people weren't doing that before, do you think?
I think at the time, bike shops and bike people thought that lots of gears and suspension was the most important sales tool. And I think that meant that the bikes actually just became more expensive. But really, what we were trying to do is simplify that and make it so that the bike, you could still have loads of fun on it, but it didn't need to have all these parts on it that added price and actually weight at the time.
And you're saying your very first mountain bike is hanging up in the office, cost you £300. Was that expensive at the time?
It was expensive for a 15-year-old kid, for sure. But I don't think compared to what you have to spend now to get a sort of equivalent bike, I think it was an easier sport to get into.
Now you're working at Cannondale, you have a history of making some of the most exotic bikes out there, and you've got a scalpel for £8,000. How does that make you feel, an £8,000 bike?
I think we make bikes for kind of everyone, and I think we put a lot of effort into making sure that the opening price point bikes, so the bikes that you talk about, the trails, are really good quality and good value for money, so that someone who buys into one of those bikes is getting some of the technology and some of the work that we put into the more expensive bikes. So I think for us, it's actually much harder to design a really good, affordable opening price point bike than it is to equip a really expensive one.
Yeah, so that Trail 8 hardtail is £475. Do you think that is cheaper now than it's ever been? You know, if you look at in inflation over the years, do you think like the entry level into mountain biking is cheaper than it's been before?
I think you're getting a better bike for £475 than I got for £300 for sure. So you're getting a much better bike. It's definitely lighter, definitely lasts longer. But again, £475 is still a lot of money to someone who might be deciding between a bike or a skateboard or a scooter or something. It's still a lot of money.
So you've got sort of a wide variety of athletes, like you've got the bikes that, you know, high end to low end. You've also got the teams. You've got Henrik Avancini racing the bike at the highest level, World Cup cross country, but also you've got the Waves team, which is sort of arguably a more grassroots team.
The idea of the Waves team is that they're showing that you can mountain bike anywhere. You don't have to get a flight to a mountain to get a lift to go up it. They're just doing it in the woods, in their back gardens, and doing stuff that everyone can do. And so that's really important. But it's also important for us to test and to prove the bikes at the highest level. So yeah, Avancini and the CFR team are completely different audience, completely different spectrum of people, but they're also important customers and important people for us.
You're a person that knows the cycle industry very well. People, especially downhillers, I think, love to compare the price of their downhill bike with a motocross bike. Do you think that's a fair comparison?
If you also think about the fact you're comparing a motocross bike to a high-end race bike, the difference is that you can literally buy from the shop the World Cup winner's bike, the same spec, exactly the same, and the same as a downhill bike. That's where the money's going. Whereas on a motocross bike, I think you'd probably find that a motocross bike that wins Anaheim Supercross would probably cost a customer north of £100,000 to buy if it was spec the same, but you can actually buy the same spec bike. So our highest end bikes are team edition bikes, and they have the same parts on that the team win the World Cup races on. So that's the difference, I think. You're not comparing apples for apples.
How do you feel about an electric rear mech that costs £670?
When a product comes to market, it's obviously often really expensive to start with, and but that enables the technology then to be developed. And as you'll see with most of those products, they become more and more affordable. But you do have to start somewhere, and I think that's a lot of money and to spend on that for the performance advantage that you'd get.
Is mountain biking expensive?
Mountain biking isn't expensive, but I think the industry could do more to promote its more affordable products so that we attract a wider audience into the sport that we all love. I think everyone has spent a lot of time and effort pushing the highest performance products. Now's the time to try to attract a new audience and get more people into the sport and show them how affordable it can be.
Thanks to Nick for that chat, super interesting, and actually I feel like I could chat to him for a lot longer about that subject and get more out of him, but it's one of those subjects where you really could dig on forever, and I do think the motorbike comparison is quite interesting. It's really easy to look at something like a Ducati or a motocross bike and just look at the complications of that motor and think, well, that cost me the same as my mountain bike. How can that happen? And of course, there are economics going into this, economies of scale, but it'd be interesting to see what changes over the next few years, especially after this big cycling boom at the moment, see if prices will come down. Well, at the moment, there's definitely a boom in the industry, and if you're trying to buy a new bike or even second-hand, the markets are pretty high. So it's probably not the easiest time to find a great deal out there, but of course you can. If you research it, look for last year's bikes that get sold off cheap sometimes, or even buy a good second-hand bike. It doesn't have to cost a bomb to get into it. Also nowadays, we've got so many more riding places popping up around the world. In the UK, we've got pump tracks popping up within city centres or trail centres out in the hills. They've made it much more accessible for everyone to get out there and enjoy riding their mountain bikes. Leave some comments down below. Let me know what you think about this video. Let me know if you think the mountain biking is too expensive, because I think we've kind of proved that it is expensive, but doesn't have to be, but you can still spend a lot of money on it. So let me know what you think down below. Give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video.